standing from my crib, of being really confused about what on earth was going on at all in any context, in terms of time, place, the kind of narrative of what this situation.
Welcome to another wonderful day, to another wonderful podcast, and I've got a special one for us today. Now, usually what happens is I bring people on here and I don't have a clue who they are. They're the strangers literally at the last moment, but this gentleman I know, and I know him reasonably well because we're both Buddhists and we come from the same sect, literally. But other than that, I don't know much of his background. So what we're going to do today, we're going to discuss what interesting things he's doing, and we're going to go with the flow with that conversation as we usually do. And his name is Lawrence O'Connor. Welcome, Lawrence. How are you today?
Yeah, really good today. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm looking forward to having that conversation right now because you've led a very interesting journey in the last 2 years, which I'm going to let you explain. But first of all, what we're going to do, I'm going to start off by just saying, what do you do to help people with what you're doing within your life? And then we'll go with the flow and we'll just have that natural conversation.
Well, I suppose I really see my life defined in probably 4 broad categories. There's family, my Buddhist community, professional community, and then there's my friendship, my wider friendship group. So in terms of family, my primary thing probably in all 4 areas is just to try not to be a dick.
I like that.
I feel if I can do that, that's a good start. And for my family, it's to be unconditionally available to them, to support them, and to always put them first. Many decades ago, I identified that to live a values-based life was what I needed to do. And I put those values first, and they've really worked well. So that would mean, practically speaking, in encouragement, unrelenting positive regard for everything that they do, and no matter what, finding the resources in myself to be able to do that. In my Buddhist community, what do I do to help the people in my Buddhist community? So I really focus on the opportunity that I have with other Buddhist practitioners as the opportunity to train myself to respect others, to really train myself to understand that the differences and the challenges are really precious and a great invitation for my personal transformation, which is finally all I can do. I can't change other people, but what I can do is, by deepening my understanding and my connection and my sense of connection to others, employ those relationships as a way of undergoing my transformation, to change whatever I need to do to change in myself, to truly deeply respect each individual, with the understanding that when I don't, it basically means that I'm not happy, and I want to be happy, and in so doing, by that self-transformation, help enable others to experience theirs and for them to be happy. But I know that it starts with me. So that's my Buddhist community. With my professional environment, I teach acting adults in different stages of their work, from relative beginners through to people that are advanced professionals who are very busy and you'll be seeing on TV and stuff. And the primary way that I help them in that context is to do the work on myself. So my Buddhist practice is a fundamental part of being able to show up and do that. And then secondarily, it's to be truthfully, authentically present, to tell the truth, because that's what I believe, my service to people as an acting teacher is, and what I believe acting can be at its most useful is to help us deepen our connection to ourselves and others truthfully, because people don't want to actually see anybody do acting. Nobody goes to a movie to watch great acting. We go to the movies or see a play to see a human being living truthfully in the given imaginary circumstances. That's what really opens our heart. And so that's how I feel I'm of service and help the people in my professional community. I also make theatre and sometimes direct, and made a couple of films and directed those, and I bring to bear the same principles that I use in my acting practice. Basically, there's very little difference between what happens in a rehearsal to what happens in my class. To me, they're the same thing. Everything is always work in progress. Everything is just sharing what we can about what we know today, about what we're working on tomorrow. We'll know some more. And I suppose the final thing about that is, it's a small word that can mean a lot, and can mean many different things to different people. But I think also what I bring is love. I feel that's at the heart of it all. To really find that love for people. So again, my Buddhist practice is fantastic for that, because it helps me dig deeper past the superficial judgment of others, to really see their greatest qualities. And obviously that could be a helpful thing in life to be working on, and particularly in the studio, the acting studio. I find that's very helpful, and I'm very aware of to what extent I am or not working on that before I show up to do that work. So I think in doing that work, I think that's also a way of serving these people who come to my class because they want to work deeply and truthfully, and that needs to be held, I think, in an almost a sacred way. For me, it's a sacred undertaking to be taken that seriously, to hold people in my heart in that way. And again, there's just no way I could be doing that without my Buddhist practice, without every morning and evening practically striving to open my heart, as Daisaku Ikeda, my mentor in life and in this practice, described. He said it's like opening the groaning doors to your life. And that's why I feel I'm doing my Buddhist practice that really serves my professional communities, because the tendency I think in a lot of professional contexts is to become cynical, to put on a mask, to have your kind of game face, and it can be quite transactional. And I don't know about other areas, but for acting and to really serve actors, to work deeply and truthfully, that ain't going to cut it. You're just going to be feeding in. If you don't do it in a heart-opening way, I believe we're to some extent going to be feeding into the neoliberal capitalist model of the entertainment industry, and losing that heart aspect. And that's not what we need right now. We need actors of heart to help illuminate each of us in society, to illuminate parts of ourselves. It's needed now, more than ever. I see the actor almost as having, in some cultures, you have a village shaman, who would take on the role of being a conduit, help people understand themselves and their own stories. And I feel that our contemporary setting in the culture we're in here is that's the actor. The actor is that role that does that on behalf of other people. And then finally, my friendship group. That's the area I think I find hardest to really understand how I can best support my wider. You said, how do I help the people in my life? I mean, that's the bit I struggle probably with most. I'm diagnosed autistic. That might be something you didn't know about me.
I didn't.
Yeah. Quite far on the spectrum. It was, it was first raised when I was at nursery school, and there was a lot of denial in my family, and I've had to just learn to manage that my whole life. And like a lot of people, perhaps in lockdown, when we had a lot of time to think about stuff, and as somebody who is quite far on the spectrum, as it turns out in my diagnosis. Lockdown was, in one respect, heaven, because, hey, welcome to my world, folks. Going outside is a challenge, interacting with people is a challenge. And it was fantastic because, wow, there was no expectations to have to interact. And it was, in one respect, it was heaven. In other respect, in regards to my neurodivergence, it was hell, because my strategies that I've managed over decades, I'm 60 years old now, that I've developed these strategies to manage it so that nobody, and other than maybe really astute specialists, would sometimes spot it and call it out, but pretty much nobody in the world would know that I had it, really. Through my way of managing it, I couldn't use a lot of strategies.
That's
because
amazing.
we were locked down in our house. We've got somebody in the house who's on the extremely vulnerable list, so we were in sort of hyper lockdown in terms of what we could do. So my previous strategies, like being able to take myself off and de-stimulate and be able to be very, very quiet and be away from people and all that stuff. I couldn't use those strategies, and I thought, wow, I'm in trouble here. So that's when I sought out an official diagnosis.
Okay.
Because I thought I really need to understand more what's happening here. I can't just be managing this myself anymore. I can't take it. So I got referred by the Autism Association of the UK.
Okay.
To a clinical specialist, and hey presto, I scored in the upper percentiles for autism, apart from empathy, which I was kind of borderline, but my overall score is way up into the autistic spectrum. And I think that, I don't know, that it might be those traits that make friendship in a wider sense difficult. And I told somebody not so long ago, it came up in conversation, that I had a formal diagnosis, and they laughed and they laughed and they laughed. And this is a person I considered my friend, I had a warm relationship with, and we were meeting for a coffee, and I said, "Why are you laughing?" And he just said, "I'm so happy." I said, "Why are you happy? That I'm officially autistic." He said, "I thought the way you were was just because you didn't like me." And I think that happens a lot in my life. I think people can interpret how I am as arrogance or conceit, or that I don't care, and I think a lot of that might just be some of these ingrained traits that I haven't been able to mask so well, probably ever, but particularly since COVID and lockdown, and a lot of my kind of tricks of the trade of how to kind of operate as a as kind of normal expected behavior have fallen by the wayside. Although I should say, my divergence I actually see as a superpower. I mean, you talked about how you like to seek out people who thrive.
That's right.
Through their divergence, and actually, as looking back in my life, it's been an absolute superpower. I had a stack of like glowing recommendations on LinkedIn, an account that I've since deleted for various reasons about how I feel about social media. I screenshotted them anyway, but for example, they say extraordinary things. People in very high positions talking about this person that was, quotes, the cleverest person they've ever worked with. And these are people with masters and who highly experienced. And my one academic qualification so far is a GCSE in art. And I think what they were identifying were the traits of the divergence that allowed me to see things in a different way, and be involved in projects that are way above my pay grade, way above what a person with my background would be, could feel probably expected to be involved with.
Let's talk about that actually, because now, I mean, I didn't know you was autistic at all. I just thought you was eccentric, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing, right? I always thought you was a warm-hearted, very easygoing, from my point of view, very eccentric, and then the people around you, I can see, love you very much, obviously, you are. That's from my point of view. But what I want to know now is that the way back in the days when your family found out you was autistic or believed you were, what was it about you when you was a child that made them look into it? So just give us some traits of your autism when you were very young. Now you can think. Now you've had a diagnosis. Now you've had the aha moment. Let's go as far back as you can remember. And what were those traits that were triggering autism?
Well, the earliest memories, the very earliest memories, are, we're talking, I can, remember standing up in my crib, of being really confused about what on earth was going on at all in any context, in terms of time, place, the kind of narrative of what this situation was. The feeling that nobody was explaining anything, and everything felt just very confusing and a muddle. Time, place, everything, routine, things that were just givens, like sleeping, eating. My very, very earliest consciousness was aware of going, what's the deal here? What's meant to be happening? Of course, I didn't use those words then. I didn't have access to the words, but that was the feeling, a real confusion, but also being able to enjoy. I've never actually really thought about this before, but to hyper fixate and enjoy that, to lose myself in a leaf for hours. I mean, we're talking crib age here, just about kind of holding on the edge of my crib, standing up. The sorts of things, this kind of jumble that would have these moments of incredible stillness. And then moving forward to like nursery school, very practically speaking, the thing that kind of raised alarms.
Okay.
I had the teachers talking to my family, where, for example, at school, I wouldn't talk at all.
Okay.
So what I would do, and I remember some of this, they would observe me. For example, one thing apparently I used to do was sit on a very particular tricycle in the nursery playground and stare at the wall and hum to myself all the time. And that really disturbed. I remember that, we overhear things kids are amazing. They hear everything. It's incredible radars. I think that's why we have to be so careful about our language with our children, and with my children similarly. Again, one of the benefits of my traits is I'm so aware of that, the language and the words that I've chosen around my kids. Since they were born, I've crafted so carefully, because I'm really aware that the things that were said about me, they probably thought that I didn't hear or didn't understand. They still sit in my heart to this day, and we're talking, being 4, 5, 6 years old. So the teachers were very worried about me. For example, doing the school nativity. It seems funny now, but it wasn't at the time. The school nativity, again, we're talking about 5 years old. So they stick a crook in my hand, dress me in a sheet, and I'm like, what? Again, I don't have these words, but I'm like, what the F is going on? There's sheep, and there's a doll in a thing with straw, and like everybody assumes what's going on. But we all know what the nativity is. We all know. I'm like, what's happening here? And then being shoved onto what turned out to be a stage, and not have a clue. Why are there people looking at me? And what are we doing here? And there's just a sense of what on earth is going on. It felt, I'll be honest, hellish. And again, this feeling of like nobody is explaining what is meant to be happening. And there was also an inciting moment when, again, in nursery school, and this is in South Africa, by the way. In my early years, I was raised by my grandmother in South Africa. My mother was an actor and was off touring around the world, and it was decided it was best to be raised there. Every day was a living hell, because I was expected to interact and communicate in a playground full of loud children, just being themselves. But to me, that was literally painful. And just again, very practically, that the brightness of the light in South Africa, my eyes were like continually hurting.
Really?
Oh gosh, I mean, even, I mean, today it's still something I really have to manage. Is bright lights, particularly now, is still a massive problem.
Okay.
It was just like being in hell. And more than once, I would climb the gate, big tall gate, to obviously keep the kids secure in this nursery, to keep people out, climb over it, and then run home because I could not stand the overwhelm. I was only tiny, and I'm running through the streets of Port Elizabeth.
Yes.
Not actually even sure where home is, just running.
Really?
Luckily, I think most times I actually arrived at home. And again, because what I realized, until things that are explained, and these days I explain things to myself because I know this about myself. So like routes and patterns and shapes of roads, I know how to manage. But then when you're little, it's just this kind of blur, and that would have to run away to home to escape what felt like abuse. It felt violent.
Yeah.
The noise, the expectation to have to interact. I've just noticed it's the AI assistant said we've only got a few minutes left, so
we've got plenty of time.
Oh, okay. So they're just some of the things, and I learned slowly over the years. Number one, to really pay attention and to learn from what I could see going around, to look for the patterns, to see really basic stuff like, when you're talking to somebody, you're meant to look at them. Okay, I can do that. The person is feeling sad, and I'm meant to look. I have to look sad. Okay, I get that. I have to look sad too, so that they know that I understand. An infinite number of rules and how to operate and how to function, how to manage things like the overstimulation. And I think got really good at it. I think that's why I became an actor originally, because I just got really good at paying attention very, very closely. And when you're teaching, acting, that skill is like gold dust, because I can focus on a moment for hours. One moment, I can zoom in precise detail very happily, and then zoom out and see a big picture if it's a scene or a play or a film, and then zoom back in, because these are skills that I've had to develop and understand and harness practically just to be able to function. And just one more example that comes to mind is one thing I could do and found myself doing, for example, was I could look at a flow of water, like a waterfall or a fountain or a flow from a hose or a tap. I worked out that if I could sit with it long enough and regulate my eye movement to the speed of the water flow, I can hold, like a stroboscopic picture, the actual droplets of water that make up that flow.
Really?
Unless it's going very, very fast. And
so hold on a second. So you can literally, it's like you're looking through a lens of a camera, and you're able to take snippets and actually see certain snippets of time that you can do. Your brain works in such a way so fast, you're able to capture those, word for a better word is capture those frames, and then you're now taking that in life, not only from the water, but you're now being able to be in a room full of people, for instance, and actually process the way people do things, say things, take that into your acting situation, and you can multiply so much detail within one given set of moment. Does that make sense? And now you've harnessed that skill. Have I got that right?
That's 100% it, Eli. Actually, I mean, you've articulated it better than I could myself. And for me, it's an intensely pleasurable thing to do. Now, what I think I've come to realize, it's not that nobody couldn't train themselves to do that. I think anybody could train themselves to do that. But I think that where the divergence comes in is wanting to do that to needing to do that, to enjoying doing that. So here's another example for you. One of my favorite things is going, if you're going on a fast train, I'll do the same thing with a leaf on a tree in the distance. And I'll just hold it and I'll enjoy for the next 10 minutes holding that leaf or the two pieces of stone by the side of the road as we're flying past. I do it with number plates as a way of entertaining myself on a long journey that my car going past. I'll hold that moment, and I don't try and remember the number plate. I just hold the moment, and then I bring the moment to mind, and I see the color, the shape, the number, the digits.
Wow!
And when you can harness it, it's a beautiful skill. It's a great skill. I wish I could say that, in a practical kind of working memory way, it's available to me. It could be if I kind of made myself do it, but on the kind of day to day, I'm kind of as forgetful as anybody. But when I choose to hold a moment, then I can.
That is a beautiful skill to have. So let's talk more about that. So when you was a child, you couldn't process everything. Everything was just a blur, and it was just floating all over the place, and nothing was explained, as you said, to you. But there must have been a moment in time when something snapped within you that started to gain that skill you're talking about for you to be able to cope. How long did that skill start to materialize? Because remember, on a daily basis, you were running away from school. You couldn't cope with what was around you. But at some stage, you had started to process the tools that were needed for you to start coping. When did those tools start to take shape? Whenabouts in your journey, and what were those beginnings of those tools?
That's a really great question. Thank you. I've never really considered that, because it's felt like such a continuum.
Something must have snapped where it's not necessarily enough was enough, but either someone, a family member, a doctor, or something happened for you to then think, right, I'm starting to get it now. Let me do this and let me do that. I don't know what it is, but some kind of transformation started at a particular point in time.
Gosh, it's a really challenging question, because it's very hard to pinpoint.
And don't necessarily pinpoint the actual moment. It may be to pinpoint an actual month or an actual 6 months. Let's start from further outwardly, as you would do, and then you pin and zoom in. So all I could sorry, you were going to say something else? No, it's just saying zoom out. So if it means that you have to look at a particular year, let's do that, and then we can break it down from there.
Okay. So I think it was probably kind of mid-teens, like 13, 14. And I think it's when the application of my abilities were beginning to find places to manifest themselves where they had recognition. So, for example, around that age, I started to teach myself classical guitar, and subsequently, taught myself, through my grades and music theory, and was like, wow, look what happens when I apply this to something kind of concrete. That's when I was getting involved. And actually had my first acting job from a young age, my first professional job from the age of 10. But that was also a kind of blur and a confusion. But again, around those mid-teen years, 13, 14, I was engaging in drama at school, and I really felt I'd come home. And what I put that down to is that in theatre, for me, you've got this container.
Yes.
And I understood the container. My mother was in a theatre company. I was acting in that company from a young age as a professional paid actor. I knew this container well. I knew its dimensions. I knew, I mean, literally and metaphorically, I knew its boundaries. I knew that anything can happen in this space, but it has boundaries which I can understand. And for me, that's where I think I started to understand life more, and how to be, how to operate. And I still do. There's nowhere I feel freer than in the studio, or in the theatre, or on the film set. I totally get it. I get what I need to be. I get what's needed from me. I get how to interact. There's also some very practical things. Is when you're working in a space,
yes,
you're very close and very intimate in that space, and then you're away from the space, and that really suits my mentality, which is great. I can know I can give myself completely to this, and know that I can then be away from it, and then do my own processing, whatever I need to do to come back to that space.
That's beautiful, because the thing is, now we've assessed it, we've checked at the age of 13, 14, you found a way to control your space, your mind, because it was other people that were controlling your space and your mind. You go to school, they're controlling you, right? You go home, they're controlling you, you know? And you had to find a way to manage that control. Because you worked in a particular way, you couldn't have that. It was chaos. So you got to a stage where you found a place of your control that worked for you, and you can react a particular time or moment that was pleasurable to you for what you needed to maintain yourself. And I think by doing that, that's where you're actually quite blessed, because you was in a family of actors. The skill set was already there, and the environment for you to actually sit in those shoes were potentially there. So by having a space where you can do what needed to reenact what you need mentally for your mental health, that's giving you great skill set. And I find that quite amazing, how you do the things you do. So from the age of 13, 14, right, you had your space, you're starting to control that. How did things start to progress beyond that age? We're now talking 17, 18. How are things now progressing? Because now we're getting to the stage where we're getting to adulthood. It's a different situation from when you're a teenager to when you have to start going out there in the world by yourself. Remember, so as much as you found the tools to be able to control your mindset and etc., you still had the comfort of the family, and other, you know, close factors. But now you're getting to the stage where you've got to go out into the world. Was there a difference? Is there a difference? Or was it same old? You can just carry on controlling and managing the way that you had always done since the age of 14 or 13.
Wow, another amazing provocation of a question to really look into that. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's really, you know, that's really astute to identify that was going to be very different. So so having discovered my kind of superpower, if you like, I was getting huge recognition in my life, my friendship groups. I just flew, having had this ignition around that age from being totally introvert. I mean, I should say, you know, I'm like that before this transition, I couldn't look up off the ground, you know, as an earlier teenager. I mean, I used to walk on the street, literally looking at the ground, burning with shame about the idea of looking another person in the face. I went from that to just flying, and literally, you know, somebody even said once, "Oh, Lawrence has arrived. Now the party can start."
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, no, it was that, you know, and it was just, it felt amazing. And I flew, and I had wonderful relationships, wonderful intimate relationships, enjoyed everything there was to enjoy. But it's, you know, you should mention like 17, 18. And here was the rookie era. And I've never forgotten this lesson. I hold it dear. is this identity that I was starting to operate with. I started to lose sight of the fact that this identity was me managing these underlying traits and feelings. I kind of started to believe my own publicity, you know, because the truth was underneath it was still this guy.
Yes.
Still,
I get that.
Working it out, and you know, but had a really good act, a good act that I liked, you know, this popular, you know, guy, and and I was starring in the school plays. The head of drama was putting me forward for drama school, and everywhere I would go, I would have friends and great enthusiasm, and trouble is, it was kind of arrogance, really. I just kind of thought, yeah, well, I'm kind of basically Superman, really, you know, forgetting the fact that this had come where I'd really come from, what was really going on underneath. And so I created I guess like a lot of us do as teenagers, we create an identity, and it was working well in a, you know, to some extent. And then almost as an expression of that, in one of my many wild hedonistic evenings of enjoying life and feeling unbounded arrogance, you see, unbounded, no rules. One of these evenings of that, somebody said, "Hey, do you want to take some acid?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, fuck." You know, wasn't using these words then, but I know the feeling was this kind of arrogance. I'm kind of Superman. Yeah, fuck yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure we should swear on this, but yeah, hell yeah. You know, let's do this. And it, again, you know, my identity, my kind of framework, my mask held up pretty well, and deepened the hedonism. Well, that's, you know, and so I would expect, you know, and then the offer was to do it again.
Okay.
And what I realized in hindsight was I was physically depleted. I was exhausted, and tired. And what I've learned since is that's what I have to really watch for, because I manage well while I'm well resourced. But if I'm exhausted, fatigued, you know, that's when the cracks really start to show. And I had this nightmare trip. It was, you know, incredibly powerful LSD. It lasted for 4 days, and it was living hell. And I'm in this hellish nightmare. I literally in the mirror saw my mask fall away. I've even got a Polaroid somewhere. I've got it scanned in somewhere on my cloud drive of me in the mirror looking like just a person in trauma, with a sign that I'd written for myself which says "Help me." And I was just lost, because that whole construct that I'd created and was enjoying fell away, and I couldn't barely leave the house. I was back to looking at the ground. I couldn't speak to anyone. The idea of picking up the telephone would make me shake with anxiety. What's worse is I could see this happening. What's worse is I'd tasted what it was like to feel free, and free of the negative aspects of my divergence, and now had just slipped right down. And the words I used at the time were just fallen through the floor, and that lasted for many months. Maybe it was a year, maybe it was 2. It's hard to know. And that's when I met this practice, because my mother was very worried about me, because this person that had kind of blossomed had not just disappeared, but was in real psychological trouble. And she found this practice of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
Okay.
And it was in the 80s in London, and it was very fashionable and a very groovy thing to do. Everybody on King's Road was chanting, you know, and everybody had Choose Hope, which is comes from a Buddhist text, originally from a dialogue with Arnold Toynbee, wearing Choose Hope t-shirts, and I was so miserable and so lost that I would have done anything to feel better. If you'd have told me to stick a geranium up my bum, stand on one leg and sing the national anthem to make myself feel better, I would have done that.
My God, that would have been a very strange image to see, I can tell you.
Maybe that'll be a performance piece for another day.
I think so.
And so what it turned out to be was my mother chanting. She didn't know what she was doing. She just heard about chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Didn't know how to do it, nothing about the philosophy. And we did it. She said, come on, just try doing this thing with me. It's making me feel a bit better. Maybe it will help you too. And we just did it to a candle in the dark in her living room. I thought, okay, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. Instantly, Eli, I experienced a transformation in myself. God, I sound like some awful evangelist. It's terrible, but this is the honest truth. Instantly, how I felt in myself, how the world reflected myself back to me instantly from that moment. To cut a long story short, within days, I was involved in a fantastic project at the Buddhist Art Center. I met my then future wife, who actually proposed to the first day I met her in the coffee queue.
Wow.
I suddenly had money. I had a wonderful home. I was out in the world, and felt so amazing about it that I went around telling everybody, I found this chanting thing. It's amazing. And we've got these little cards that say Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and everybody I was working with, everybody I met, I was going, I know this sounds mad, but I just started doing this thing, and it's completely changed how I feel and how I am in the world, and how the world is responding to me. And many of those people then, and we're talking about now 1986, are still practicing to this day. Many of them are like senior leaders, and for many of them it's become the kind of pillar of their life as well, because they also then experience this, and that hasn't stopped till today, through all the challenges. I know that when I start to fall down the black hole in this dark well of despair, hope, being lost, confused, overwhelmed by what feels like the chaos of just day-to-day living, absolutely reliably, when I sit down to chant, that starts to change, and this sunrise of hope, understanding of all the same things that are going on, but instead of them feeling awful, I see them as things that are helpful. I see possibilities. I see how the challenges are helping me grow, for example, or how that these feelings are deepening my compassion, and so on and so forth. Every area of challenge becomes an area of opportunity and a way to help encourage myself and others.
Right. So as you left your teens, you obviously were exhausted. Probably, can it be said to you was going through a stage of burnout? Because obviously it took a huge amount of energy to actually mask, in a way, to be able to mask in this construct that you had made to be popular and, to carry on life and to be happy. But you only had so much energy, and that obviously broke down, and that caught you out massively, because you thought you was like a nuclear reactor which could go on forever. But you got caught out with that, and luckily enough, your mother showed you a way that may help you. So did the Buddhism that you came over with, the chanting, did that help? Did that take over the construct, the actual what you had built before to make you happy, or did you use it in conjunction with what you had built before to help you gain that energy and to come out of that depression, that burnout, etc.? How do the two go together? Was it conflicting, or did you leave one for the other?
Wow, Eli, these are amazing questions. Gosh, you could be my therapist. I might to see if you're available after this. Fantastic question. Thank you so much. These are things I haven't really considered. So looking back, I'll be honest with you, what I told myself at the time was that I was intentionally indoctrinating myself, but indoctrinating myself with something that was helpful, as opposed to indoctrinating myself with an approach to life that was unhelpful, if you know what I mean.
I hear you.
So I think at the time, to be honest, it was I sort of felt like it was a kind of positive self-brainwashing, is if I'm honest about it. I mean, I see it a lot more deeply now, and I've had nearly 40 years of practice, so I see it more deep. But I think at the time, that's how it was. So I think I was replacing. So you talk about what was I doing it in conjunction with, or was this a new construct? And I think it was more what you describe as a new construct. I think. And I was aware that it was happening. I was aware that the way that the practice made me feel, and then we practice in a community of other practitioners. In the UK, it's an organisation, SGI UK, that we're both members of, and there's a way of being that I felt I could practice. I could practice being this person in this environment on purpose, where the values were based on courage, wisdom, and compassion. And that became my training ground for how to then be outside of the Buddhist organization. And I was always encouraged to use activities like that. Try on who you would like to be in the world. Don't accept your limitations. Don't be limited by your mind's idea of the confinement of your life. Experiment, with being who you want to be. You use activities, the Buddhist activities, in that way. And I really just took that on trust and did that, and found that that's exactly it. This replaced this new construct. And I'll be honest with you, I think I went back to just burying my traits as kind of an embarrassment, and to be honest with you, and it's taken me a long time to kind of accept, and accept and be proud of and celebrate. And I guess I'm helped by the time, because back then nobody was talking about neurodivergence. It was a kind of shameful. It was a bit like admitting, you're ill, basically. Whereas now the times are different, and there's a lot more recognition. I say that the times are different. Of course, they seem to be reverting back again now, with the rise of what's happening politically, but for a while, up until recently, it's been encouraged. We've been encouraged to explore all of our divergences, what makes us different, to celebrate them as gifts rather than as problems. And so I'm sort of I've been helped by that to come out. I called it coming out. Coming out to people. Like my friend who I told and he laughed. It felt like coming out. But it's a great relief. Now I don't come out in order to excuse myself, because I don't think any divergence or any psychological traits that any of us have is an excuse for example, behaving badly or disrespectfully. So it's not an excuse, but nevertheless, it's still a relief, to be able to just say it out loud, and so that people might know that, for example, if it seems like I blanked you, it's not because I don't love you very much and care about you and think about you all the time. It's just part of my wiring that makes it so. It doesn't excuse making anybody feel bad or ignored, but hopefully it helps people understand. What's going on.
Totally understand. Right. So it's got to a stage now, so you've been able to manage your autism through your chanting, and I always suggest to people there isn't just one road for everybody. I mean, in your case, the Buddhism has helped you. In another case, something completely different would help someone else. But in your case, what it's done, it's helped you just to manage your autism, accept. And acceptance is always powerful, because once you accept what you have control to manage or change what you have. Without acceptance, you're giving the power to someone else or something else. And if someone else or something else has the power, then you can't change anything, right? So by accepting the situation, you are in a position where you can manage and you can manipulate, want for a better word, your situation so you can cope. So you've had almost 40 years to be able to manage this via Buddhism by chanting. it's helped you manage in total without using the, can I say, false construct of what you had before, because you used it mainly, you used it focused just on your acting. So now you're a great actor and you're helping people to act and to produce and all those other wonderful things. How does it affect you as your, how can I say, your old, how can I say, comfortable self from way back in the days used that acting environment for your autism, which you don't use now? How have you still become a great actor using those acting skills without using the acting as a coping mechanism for your autism? How have you separated that, considering it used to be an old friend? Does that make sense?
Gosh, that's a deep question, Eli. Wow.
I'm a deep person. I like the way people think. By understanding how people think, I understand more about myself, and this is why I generally want to know these questions.
Well, I think it's a moment to moment, day to day conscious effort to reconcile that. Okay. Again, the great lesson of that very traumatic experience in my late teens, where the mask fell away, was to not believe the mask. See, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a mask. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think the problem comes when we believe our own act. I think that's where I think anyone, not just somebody with autism, but anyone would come unstuck. We believe our own publicity. Yeah. David Bowie's great and everything, but the person we see is not the person that sits at home eating a cup of tea and having a biscuit with his wife. In his pajamas.
That's true.
And he wouldn't be David Bowie if he believed his own act. He was conscious of his act. I don't know why that example just spontaneous.
It's a good example. It's a very good example.
And so for me, in front of the Gohonzon that we chant to, you and I, mandala, I sit in front of that, and part of its function for me is to reflect back my true self. And then it helps me then when I'm out in the world be aware of what's my mask, which is fine. We all need an identity from time to time. We're one way with talking to our financial advisor than we are with talking to our mother, and that's all right. It doesn't mean we're dishonest. But I do think each of us needs to examine the truth of what's the act and what's the person underneath that's observing our act, that's observing the behavior, that's observing the mask, because they're not the same thing. And again, I just want to reiterate, I don't think that makes us dishonest. There's an old phrase, I forget who it comes from, is there's no man as honest as he that calls himself a liar.
That's true. That's true. No, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so mental health at the moment is a very important thing. Let's say what it is. Mental health is massive. Be that autistic, dyslexic, or just so-called neurotypical. It's irrelevant. So let's talk about that, because you are doing something with mental health at the moment. You're studying and you're trying to make a difference in a certain way. Let's talk about that and tell us more about what are you doing regarding you studying in some way, aren't you? Just give us some showdown on that.
So at the moment, I'm just in the stages of completing an MSc in Creative Arts and Mental Health at Queen Mary University, London. It's part of the Wolfson Institute of Population Health within the university. And I'm focusing on theatre as the creative medium for my research that I'm doing for it, and the paper that I'm currently trying to finish writing for the final part of the MSc. And really what that was about was, in my work with actors, we go very, very deep, and actors are asked, when they're working truthfully and deeply, they're asked to become sometimes very vulnerable. And it's struck me that this is a huge responsibility for the acting teacher to honor. And it struck me that there was nothing in my training, either as an actor or to teach acting, that really dealt with that. And when people would say in the studio when I was teaching, they'd say, oh, this is incredible. I love these classes. They feel like therapy. My whole life is changing, not just my acting. And I would say, I kind of follow the script that I'd been trained with. Sorry, that's above my pay grade. I don't know anything about your personal life. This is just about your acting. I can't speak to your personal experiences or how this is affecting your life. But the more that went on, passing on how I'd been taught, I just thought, this doesn't feel honest. It feels disingenuous. Because when you work this way, of course it changes your life. Of course it affects how you are in the world. And there's two aspects to that. One is fantastic that people can experience the positive benefit of that.
Of course.
The other aspect is you could do so much harm. And there's a lot of research on it now about how much harm is occurring within people's drama and acting training.
Of course.
Justifying the ends, justifying the means by the result. And sometimes, there's been recent examples I know of in an acting school which uses the same technique that I specialize in. And I'm not saying I can say for sure there's a correlation. I can't. But just in recent months, 2 people have died by suicide in that group.
Wow.
And I'm not saying it's their training made them choose to want to end their lives.
Yeah.
However, what I do observe in the aftermath of that, within that particular group, is a celebration of their work. There are clips from a film that one of them was in, of them, just the character just destroying themselves emotionally, and it's powerful and wonderful.
Yeah.
But I don't think, to my knowledge, that the people involved in that teaching organization, some of them I know personally, it's kind of small world. I don't think any of them that I know of have chosen to understand mental health, the psychology of what's happening on a neurological level to an actor when they're working in this way. And I don't think we're really equipped to deal safely with people working in that way. And I just decided I can't let myself be part of that. I need to take more responsibility for the well-being of the people that I'm training. And so that's what incited me to want to do this training, to gain real insight into psychologically what is actually happening here. What are the mechanics? It's not good enough just to repeat stuff that I've been taught because it sounds good. I need to know what's helpful, and if it's helpful, why, and also need to know more about what could be unhelpful or could be harmful, or even potentially abusive, emotionally or psychologically. So that was the instigation for undertaking the MSc, to be more of service to the people that I train and the people direct. And also a nice kind of side benefit has been, I've also got to understand how theatre practice and acting practice can also in turn inform psychiatric practice as well. So that was a kind of nice thing to discover, how kind of welcome a lot of what I learn in the acting studio is in the area of psychological well-being and therapeutic support.
Well, can I say, Lawrence, it's commendable that you're actually doing something like that, because in acting, you're actually accessing the deep mindset of what's going on, and you have to access emotions that may not have been dealt with way back in the days. So, and this is taking in acting. This is how to become a great actor. You have to think of something that you were effective at in the past, and it brings out certain things.
I have to stop you there. That's almost 100% it. However, what you're describing there is a Stanislavski, Lee Strasberg approach, which is typically known as the method.
Okay.
I absolutely don't do that. With my practice is based on something called Meisner technique.
Okay.
And basically the key difference is with Meisner technique, to get to emotional truth.
Yeah. Okay.
Which the loosely called method does as well. What we use in Meisner technique is we use imagination. We never, ever, ever, ever use our real life. Now, you might think, well, that maybe would mean you're not so vulnerable. Not at all. If you're using your imagination to truthfully get to what it might be and how it might come to pass, that, for example, the most loving person in your life would hurt you in the worst way possible, in a way that you believe. And we do it all the time when we're daydreaming. That's what we're doing. If you imagine in a way that you believe that you're going to be given that beautiful car, the feeling in you is positive. You feel great. You're not acting feeling great. You do.
Yeah.
But it's just in your imagination. So with the technique that I teach, we're using that principle, but on purpose, professionally, reliably. However, not only do you go just as deep as trawling up past experiences, you can go even deeper, because you can go to places you've never even been to in your life.
That's right. I get
on all ends of the spectrum, in terms of joy and in terms of sadness and grief.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that, because if you're using imagination, you're going beyond your experience. So then I can see how powerful that can be. My God, our conversations can be really, you know what? But I'm going to put a line in the sand, because if I don't, we'll be here for a very long time. We may have to do this another day.
It's great talking to you, Eli. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you so much.
No, beautiful. Lawrence, if people want to get in touch with you, be that for advice with acting or anything else, how can they do so? You can either go to lawrenceoconnor.com. That's Lawrence with a W, O'Connor with an OR at the end, or Lawrence O'Connor Acting Training. Or if you just put Lawrence O'Connor Acting Training into Google, I think I come up last time I looked on the first page, as far as I can remember. Yeah. That's good. And before you go and we put wraps on things, what one piece of gold can you leave the listeners with, especially to help people who are neurodivergent? What one piece of advice can you leave them with that would help them? You only have one, not three.
Oh boy!
But what?
How could you? How could you, Eli? Oh my goodness! Wow.
If you had to speak to a younger self, be that in your teens, early 20s, whatever, what one thing would you say to that Lawrence?
Your neurodivergence is your superpower.
How wonderful. And you've explained that so well through this conversation, so we all know what you're talking about. And I see now, listeners, do you see how wonderful this man is? He's gone through great difficulty when he was a child. The world was way overwhelming, as you could hear, but he found a way to actually survive in the teens, and then again, a second stage, survive in the 20s. Learned acting skills. It runs in the family. You can see why this man is a genius when it comes to acting. If he resonates with you and you're interested in acting or anything similar, or any questions at all that we've spoken about today, he's your man. So if he resonates, the only time you've got to lose is time itself. You might as well make that connection and say hello, and then take it from there. Lawrence, thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Amazing. This has been such a gas. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's our pleasure for sure. And in the meantime, listeners, like, subscribe, and all those wonderful things, and sayonara.